"You don't have to wait up." That's what she said while clipping on earrings I'd never seen before. Silver, sharp, a little too bold for a woman who once debated for 10 minutes over what color beige to paint the hallway. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her makeup with steady hands. Like this was just another Tuesday. Like she wasn't setting a bomb in the middle of our living room and lighting the fuse with cherry lipstick. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't have to. There was a different tone in her voice that night. Not angry, not apologetic, almost free. And it made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't name. Not jealousy, not heartbreak. It was the quiet, creeping ache of realizing that whatever I'd been trying to protect had already been broken long before I noticed the cracks. She looked over her shoulder, caught me staring. "Don't look at me like that," she said. "It's just a date." Just like I was supposed to nod and smile and maybe wish her luck. She grabbed her coat, not the puffy green one I got her last Christmas, but the sleek black one with the belt that she bought herself without telling me. The one she never wore around me before. I said nothing. I didn't even flinch. And that silence, it crushed her. I saw it. Her hand paused on the doorknob. She didn't expect that. No shouting, no begging, no "who is he?" I just sat there in that sad little corner chair with a cushion that always sinks too deep, watching her walk out of the life we used to share like she was late for brunch. The door clicked shut, and all I could think was, this isn't the worst part, because the worst part was still crawling toward me, slow and steady, waiting in the space between what I knew and what I didn't know yet. Like what else she'd been hiding, like how many dates there had already been, like why our shared Netflix account had a second profile called M, and why I'd find a receipt in the trash the next morning from a rooftop bar in a part of town she claimed to hate. She didn't know that I'd already started digging, quietly, carefully, the way men like me do everything. Too little, too late, but precise. She thought I'd sit still like always, that I'd stew and mope and cry into my pillow. But not this time. This time, I watched her walk away because I was already planning what I'd do next. The next morning, she texted me a photo of a croissant. Just that. A golden, flaky croissant on a white plate with some caption like, "This place has the best morning light." No apology, no explanation, just breakfast and a carefully cropped lie. I stared at that photo like it was a confession written in powdered sugar. She wasn't at brunch. She was still with him. I didn't respond. Instead, I slipped off the couch where I'd fallen asleep without even meaning to and walked into the kitchen. The trash hadn't been taken out yet. That's when I saw it. A folded receipt with a blue logo I didn't recognize. Tara. It read at the top. Rooftop dining, downtown. A place she once told me she'd never go because it was too loud, too fake, too full of people trying to impress each other. Funny. I guess her opinion changed. Or maybe she just meant she wouldn't go with me. The receipt was time-stamped 11:32 p.m. 1 cocktail, 1 glass of wine, a dessert labeled 2 spoons. 2 spoons. There it was. Not explosive, not dramatic, just quiet betrayal. Tiny details that scream once you learn how to listen to them. I didn't throw it away. I placed it on her side of the bed, carefully, like an offering or a trap. Then I opened my laptop and sat in the quiet hum of the morning. I stared at the login screen of her old Google account. Years ago, she used it to share playlists with me. I remembered the password because she made it from a lyric in a song we once slow danced to in our first apartment. She never changed it. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But when someone takes a knife to your reality, you don't wait for permission to bleed. There were emails, calendar invites, reservations, a forwarded flight confirmation to her personal email for a weekend in Asheville, listed under 2 names. Marjorie Lynn Caldwell, her full name, and David Marcus Linwood. The name made my chest go tight. David. I'd heard it before. Once, maybe twice, when she mentioned yoga, or maybe it was book club or game night. I don't know. The lies came packaged so casually you could trip over them and think it was your own fault. I sat there staring at the screen, heart thudding, hands still sticky from holding too much truth at once. She was planning to leave. Not permanently, no, just long enough to disappear, to escape the dullness of being tethered to someone like me. She hadn't filed for divorce, hadn't even asked for space. She was just stepping out of our life like it was a pair of old shoes she kept in the garage in case it rained. And the most disturbing part? There was no villain in her messages. No rage, no manipulation, just excitement. Butterflies, the kind of fluttery, innocent joy I hadn't seen in her in years. But it wasn't for me. She had already walked out once. But she didn't know I was already gone. Something inside me had detached, quietly, like a paper lantern cut from its string. I closed the laptop, stared out the window. It was overcast, the kind of sky that doesn't rain, just threatens to. When she walked through the door that afternoon, holding a reusable coffee cup like everything was fine, I didn't even look up. She said, "Hey." I said, "Your receipt's on the bed." She froze. Her keys clinked against the table as she set them down too quickly. She didn't ask, "What receipt?" That told me everything. And I didn't ask who David was because I already knew. Now I was just waiting to see how she tried to explain it. She didn't say anything at first. Her jaw tightened, her hand still on the doorknob like she hadn't fully committed to coming in. I watched her eyes flick toward the bedroom where the receipt waited like a ghost she hadn't invited. "You went through my stuff?" she asked. Not defensive, just cold. Like she was already filing this into a drawer labeled, "Justify later." I didn't answer that. "I didn't go looking," I said finally. "It was right there. You left it out like you didn't care if I found it." She stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind her, but her footsteps didn't move. We stood in the same space we'd once decorated together with string lights and throw pillows from stores she swore she'd never overspend at. Back then, she used to sing to herself while arranging the bookshelves. Now, she just stood there, silent, like a guest trying to remember where the bathroom was. "I can explain," she began. "Don't," I cut in. "Don't insult both of us." That rattled her. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a rebooting computer. She shifted her weight. I could tell she had a list of things ready to say, phrases she'd probably rehearsed in the car. Lines like, "I didn't mean for it to happen," or "We're just talking," or "You haven't really been here for a long time." But none of them came out. She just walked to the bedroom slowly, and when she saw the receipt on the comforter, she picked it up like it burned. I stayed in the doorway. "David, right?" I asked. Her head tilted slightly, like a bird hearing an unexpected sound, but she didn't nod, didn't confirm. "Is this your first date?" I continued. "Or are we in double digits?" Still nothing. That silence. That was her answer. So I gave her mine. "You know," I said, "I would have rather you screamed at me. I would have preferred a drunken confession, an ugly fight, even a thrown glass. At least then I'd know you felt something." She turned slowly, holding the receipt like it was someone else's tragedy. "I didn't want to hurt you, Everett. You just wanted something different," I finished for her. She nodded, and for a moment we weren't enemies. We were just two tired people standing in the remains of a home they'd both outgrown. But then she said something I didn't expect. "I wasn't going to tell you," she whispered. "I was going to wait until I knew what I wanted. But now you've ruined that too." That word, ruined, it stuck in my brain like glass in a tire. She wasn't apologizing. She was accusing me of interrupting her process, like I crashed a party I wasn't invited to despite being the one who paid for the damn venue. "So, I'm the problem," I said slowly, letting the weight of it sink into the room. "I didn't say that. But you meant it." She sat on the edge of the bed, receipt crumpling in her hand, her shoulders hunched like a child caught lying about candy. "It's not that simple, Everett." "No," I said. "It's exactly that simple. You're someone else. And I was supposed to keep folding laundry and acting like you were just out late with friends." I watched her crumble in slow motion, piece by piece, until there was nothing but the shell of the woman I once knew. The same woman who now had flight tickets to Asheville with a man who probably didn't even know what my name was. But what she didn't know yet was that I had more than a receipt. What I was about to reveal would change the entire narrative. Because I wasn't the only one she'd underestimated. David wasn't who she thought he was. And thanks to one dumb mistake, I now had proof that she wasn't just cheating on me. She was being played, too. And I was about to let her find that out the same way I had, without warning. She didn't notice my phone was in my hand the entire time. While she sat on the edge of our bed, clutching that receipt like it meant anything anymore, I was pulling up screenshots I'd taken the night before. Not out of spite, but because something didn't sit right with me about David Marcus Linwood. After she'd fallen asleep on the couch 2 nights earlier, wine glass in hand, still wearing makeup, phone buzzing non-stop, I'd taken her device from her lap. She didn't even flinch. I didn't go through messages right away. I just checked the call history. I knew what I was looking for. I wasn't expecting what I found. The number listed under D didn't belong to any David Linwood. It belonged to a corporate registry for a marketing firm called Silver Echo Group, based in Chicago. That didn't make sense. She told me David was local, that he taught yoga at a studio 3 blocks from her office. But the number she called 5 times a day was connected to someone else entirely. And the registered account holder wasn't David. It was Melissa Linwood. That changed everything. I didn't confront her immediately because I needed context. And I got it from someone who owed me a favor, a guy named Callum who'd done freelance cybersecurity work for me when I was helping my cousin recover a stolen domain. He still had access to a few quiet tools. Nothing illegal, just enough to find out that David Linwood was a composite identity, a social media ghost with photos pulled from modeling agencies and lifestyle blogs. No public records, no tags, no real digital trail. The man my wife thought she was seeing, he wasn't real. He was a mirror, a scam. And now I sat across from her in the same room where we'd once picked out curtain colors, holding this loaded truth like a live wire. She looked up from her knees. "I just need time," she murmured. "I don't know what to say to you, Everett." "You don't have to say anything," I replied calmly. "But you should listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." She tensed. I could see her chest rise and fall faster now. I leaned against the wall near the window, the light casting half my face in shadow, and said, "David isn't who you think he is. In fact, he's not David. He's not even in this state." Her confusion was instant, visceral. "What are you talking about?" I showed her the phone. First the registry, then the address, then the photo of David on a different website under a different name, some influencer post about hiking shoes from 4 years ago. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Her hands slowly covered her mouth. Then came the final blow. "Callum checked the metadata in the messages," I said. "You weren't texting one man. You were messaging an automated conversational front. Whoever's running it probably watched you from the start, filtered you through an algorithm, and crafted responses just good enough to make you think someone finally saw you." She dropped the receipt. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. I video chatted with him." I nodded. "You saw someone, but that wasn't live. It was playback, carefully designed to trick people like you. And it worked." She stood up. She looked small now, like the room was swallowing her. Her confidence, her rehearsed lines, gone. Her date nights fabricated for a fantasy. Her affair a carefully designed illusion she fell into with both feet while I stayed here, folding laundry and wondering why her perfume changed. "You were going to leave me," I said softly, "for a man who doesn't exist." Tears welled in her eyes. Not for me, not out of regret, but for the humiliation, the bitter sting of being exposed. Not by the man she betrayed, but by the truth she ignored. "I thought," she started. "You thought you'd found a way out," I interrupted. "But you were walking into a trap. He wasn't going to meet you in Asheville, Lena. He was going to take your information, your photos, your details, and vanish." She slumped onto the bed. No more words, just silence. I should have felt satisfied. I should have walked out, maybe packed my bags, maybe slammed the door like a man with pride. But I didn't. I just watched her sit there and unravel. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed her to feel it. Not what I felt. That was long gone. I wanted her to feel the same emptiness she tried to replace with fiction. And I wasn't done yet, because I had just received an email that morning from a name neither of us had said aloud in years. And it was the real bombshell that would change everything again. She sat there shaking, staring into a void that didn't exist 5 minutes ago. A woman who thought she was in control, now unraveling, not from heartbreak, but from the bitter taste of humiliation. I could have stopped right there, let her cry it out, maybe even forgiven her in some alternate life. But instead, I opened my email and turned the screen toward her. "You remember Jules Vardon, don't you?" I said casually. The blood drained from her face instantly. Now, that was a name that cut deeper than David ever could. She hadn't heard it in 6 years, maybe 7, back when she worked in digital branding and swore it was all just business. Jules had been a client, wealthy, loud, arrogant. I never liked the guy. Too smooth, too familiar with her, always texting late, always calling during dinner. She swore he was just high maintenance, that she managed difficult personalities all the time. But I remembered the business trip she took to Austin, the one where she was supposed to be part of a 2-person team pitching a new campaign, but the other person never showed. I remembered how she wouldn't answer my calls that night. And when she came back, her perfume smelled different, sharper. There was a new ring on her finger, just a cheap little band she claimed was a gift from a client's wife. I believed her back then like a fool. Well, apparently Jules never forgot her. And this morning, out of nowhere, he sent me an email. Not her, me. I hadn't heard from the guy in years. And there it was in my inbox. Subject: just thought you should know. The message was short. Too short, really. But it came with an attachment. A PDF of screenshots, chat logs, photos, metadata, all recent. She had reconnected with Jules. Before David, before the fake affair, before the lies about yoga and book clubs. I saw it all. Her reaching out under a fake name, using a private email I hadn't even known existed. She was testing the waters again, dipping her toe in familiar fire. But Jules wasn't playing along this time. Turns out he was married now, a father of 2. And unlike the fantasy she'd fallen for with David, this time the man she was pursuing didn't want to be caught. So instead, he covered his own tracks and threw her to the wolves, meaning me. She didn't just cheat, the email said. She built a backup plan. I figured you deserve to know who you're living with. When I showed her the screen, Lena didn't scream. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try to lie. She just sat back, eyes glossy like her world was tilting, and she couldn't decide which way was down. I said nothing more. I let the weight settle because what do you even say at that point? This wasn't a single mistake. It wasn't even a double life. This was a woman who decided long ago that certainty was boring and chaos felt more like freedom. She wasn't trying to escape a bad marriage. She was chasing a feeling. Validation, excitement, a mirror that told her she was still wanted, still powerful, still young. And she was getting older, not on the outside. She looked amazing, still turned heads, but inside, something was rotting. She needed eyes on her constantly. She needed someone to say, "You're everything." And when I stopped doing that, when I slipped into the quiet routines of love and comfort, she started looking elsewhere. First Jules, then ghosts, then algorithms. I looked at her one last time and asked, what were you going to do if it had worked? If David had turned out to be real? If Jules had taken the bait? She didn't answer. And that silence, it was worse than any confession. That night, I packed a bag. Just one. I left everything else behind. Not as some dramatic gesture, but because I didn't need any of it. The version of me she betrayed, that man was staying in this house. The one walking out, he had nothing left to lose. But right as I opened the door, she finally spoke. "Everett." Her voice cracked. "What are you going to do?" I turned to her slowly. "Nothing." And that, I knew, was the one thing she couldn't handle. The idea that I wasn't going to yell, beg, threaten, or even fight. That I was just gone. But what she didn't know was that I had one more truth to drop. And I was saving it for the right moment. Because the real twist, the one that would shatter her carefully constructed reality forever, was still coming. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't crash in a motel. And I sure as hell didn't sleep in my car. When I stepped out that door, I didn't look back. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I had a place waiting, one she never knew existed. It wasn't fancy, just a studio apartment tucked into the back of a quiet building 2 blocks from the river. The lease had been in my name for months. No one else knew. No mail, no shared key, no trace. It started as a contingency plan. Not because I was expecting betrayal, but because I'd felt it coming. You can only feel your spouse look through you for so long before something inside you starts whispering, "Have a door ready." I didn't cheat. I didn't plan to leave. But I prepared, quietly, like you prepare for a storm no one else believes is coming. Now I was sitting on the futon, staring at a photo of us from 3 years ago that I had brought with me. Not out of sentiment, but because I needed the reminder. I needed to remember what I was walking away from, not what I was losing. She hadn't texted, not once. "No, where are you? No, come back." Nothing. And that silence was louder than anything else. But I didn't sit in that silence for long, because I still had something to deliver. Not out of revenge, but because she deserved to know just how badly she'd miscalculated everything. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting. I didn't warn her. I didn't ask permission. I just texted one line, "Lunch, 1 hour, Norwich Cafe. Don't be late." She replied 5 minutes later with a single word. "Why?" I didn't answer. And when she walked in 20 minutes late, of course, I was already seated. Black coffee in front of me, envelope on the table. She wore sunglasses indoors. Her hair was pulled back like she hadn't washed it. There were smudges under her eyes that no concealer could hide. She sat down slowly, glancing at the envelope like it might explode. "What is this?" she asked. I slid it forward. "Proof." She didn't touch it. "I'm not playing games, Everett." "I'm not either." Finally, she opened it. Inside was a printed thread of messages. Ones I'd intercepted through a private email. One she never knew I saw. Not to Jules, not to David, to another man entirely. One she hadn't even met in person yet. They were graphic in tone, weirdly poetic, full of flattery and false memories. The man's name was Curtis, but she had saved him in her contacts under the name Marie. Classic misdirection. He lived in Vermont. They had plans to meet next month. She had even booked the tickets. She skimmed the pages slowly, then stopped halfway. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "You were lining them up," I said quietly. "One after another, like options." She didn't deny it. Instead, she whispered, "How long have you known?" "Long enough to stop blaming myself." Her voice cracked. "Everett, I was lonely. I didn't feel." I cut her off. "You didn't feel worshipped." She looked away. "You know what the most painful part is?" I continued. "It's not the cheating, not even the lies. It's the realization that nothing I did would have ever been enough. I could have loved you harder, softer, louder, quieter. You still would have gone looking for someone who could reflect back a version of you that made you feel important. I never meant to hurt you." "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't think I'd matter enough to stay hurt for long." That one landed. I saw it. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She blinked them back like a professional trying to maintain some illusion of control. I stood up, left a 20 on the table, and looked at her one final time. "You don't get to rewrite this story," I said. "You lived it. You authored every chapter, and now you can sit in the ending." She opened her mouth, probably to say something poetic or pitiful, or maybe both. But I was already walking away, back into a life she was never going to be part of again. And as I stepped out of that cafe, the sky opened up. Not with sunshine, not with rain, just clouds. The kind that drift forever. But for once, I wasn't the one being left behind. Days passed. No calls, no messages, no accidental just checking in. I could feel her pride bleeding through the silence. She was too ashamed to reach out, too stubborn to apologize, too afraid I might say something unforgivable in return, or worse, say nothing at all. I let her stew in it. Not because I wanted her to suffer. I was done wanting anything from her. But because I had nothing left to give. At least that's what I thought until I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Illinois area code. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut said, "Pick up." "Everett?" The voice said, cautious but familiar. I paused. "Who is this?" "It's Celia." Celia Bryan. From, well, a long time ago. I froze. Celia had been someone I cared about once, long before Lena. Back in my 20s, before I had learned how to play the quiet, dependable guy. Celia was fire and wind. Unpredictable and hilarious and brilliant. We never officially dated. We almost did, but life yanked us in opposite directions before we got the timing right. And then, just like that, we disappeared from each other's lives. Until now. I heard what happened, she said gently. I saw something through a mutual connection on LinkedIn. Someone mentioned your name. Something about divorce proceedings. I hadn't filed anything yet. Lena hadn't either. But apparently, word had leaked through someone who knew someone who worked at Lena's firm. Classic digital grapevine. We talked for over an hour, not just about Lena or what she'd done or the hollow months that came before it, though I didn't spare the details, but also about where life had taken us. Turns out Celia had moved back to the city 2 years ago. She'd gone through her own storm. An engagement called off 6 weeks before the wedding. She laughed about it now, but there was an edge behind the sound. A scar. I told her about the apartment. She asked if I had food in my fridge. I lied and said yes. Then she said, "I'm going to bring you dinner. Don't argue." 2 hours later, she showed up with Thai food, a 6-pack of some weird artisanal soda, and that same smile I remembered from all those years ago. The kind that made you feel like she already knew your worst day and didn't care. We didn't kiss. We didn't flirt. We just sat on the floor with takeout containers, trading old memories like war stories. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel invisible. But here's the twist. The next morning, while I was finishing up some work emails, I got another message. This time from Lena. Just a single sentence. "Who is Celia? And why did I see a photo of her leaving your building?" I blinked. The message hadn't come through text. It was a chat request through an old shared account we'd once used to store wedding planning documents. I'd forgotten I still had it installed. Apparently, she hadn't. Turns out someone, maybe a mutual connection, maybe a nosy neighbor, had spotted Celia leaving my apartment and passed along the sighting like gossip candy. Lena had always been hyper-aware of appearances. She could sleep with 3 strangers and not feel an ounce of shame. But God forbid anyone thought I'd moved on before she was ready to be publicly pitted. I didn't reply to her message. Instead, I forwarded her a photo. Not of Celia, not of me, but of a receipt for 2 meals, dated 6 weeks ago, from the same rooftop bar Lena had gone to that night with David. Her voice had cracked when I confronted her about that place. She said it wasn't serious, that it wasn't real. So, I sent her a note with it that simply read, "Now imagine if I said that too." I didn't need to explain more. I wasn't dating Celia, but I wasn't explaining myself to someone who forfeited the right to ask questions the moment she started shopping for attention like it was a clearance sale. 2 hours later, Lena sent a longer message. "You're not who I thought you were." I just stared at the screen, biting back a laugh, because that was the first honest thing she'd said in months. She was right. I wasn't who she thought I was, and she was about to find out just how much more of her life I still held in my hands. Not to punish, not to threaten, but to finally close the book. I didn't answer her last message. Not because I didn't have a response. I had hundreds. Sarcastic ones, cold ones, even kind ones buried deep somewhere between fatigue and apathy. But none of them mattered anymore. When she said, "You're not who I thought you were," I realized she still didn't understand. I hadn't changed. I'd simply returned to the version of myself that she stopped looking at years ago, the one she once loved before she convinced herself she was missing something louder. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The following week, I filed the papers. Quietly, cleanly. No drama, no final showdown. I didn't even tell her. She'd find out when the envelope arrived. I imagined her opening it alone in the kitchen, probably with one hand wrapped around a coffee cup she used to make jokes with. I imagined her standing there, blinking at the seal, realizing for the first time that this wasn't a threat or a tactic. It was freedom for both of us. Around the same time, I helped Celia move an old bookshelf in her new office. No grand gestures, no romance, just 2 people who had been through their own hurricanes, choosing to stand still beside each other for a while. She never asked for details. She never tried to fix anything. She just showed up when she said she would. That was enough. The apartment started to feel more like home. I hung a photo of my niece on the wall, bought a cheap record player. I found myself humming again in the morning while making coffee, something I didn't even realize I'd stopped doing. And one day, as I walked along the river, I saw a couple sitting on a bench, arguing about something small, something dumb. I don't know why, but I smiled. Not because I was mocking them, but because I understood it. The effort, the mess, the beauty in trying. That night, I opened my phone and looked at Lena's contact one last time. I hovered over the text field, fingers resting, thoughts circling. There were things I could have said, final truths, warnings, even well wishes. But instead, I hit delete contact. Not to forget her, but to stop letting her memory take up space where my life was beginning again. 2 months later, I was sitting outside that same cafe we met at for the receipt lunch. This time with Celia across from me, laughing about something ridiculous involving a broken lamp and a cat that didn't belong to either of us. It wasn't a date, but it wasn't not a date either. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like a man who had been betrayed. I just felt like a man who had finally walked out of the fire and didn't need to look back to prove he'd survived.